This is the midterm review session for special problems in animation from fall of 2019. Computer terms and definitions. A bit is the term for binary digit. Computer memory is a measured state change, either 0 or 1, on or off. It only has two states. That's why it's called binary. It's called digit because it's a number. This is the smallest unit of computer memory. A byte is a group of 8 bits. It's also called an octet. A pixel is a picture element. It is one dot of light on the screen. The computer screen consists of a grid pattern of dots of different colors. The aspect ratio is a proportion of the width to the height. You drop the units out. You have to use the same unit for the width and the height. But then when you divide it, it drops the unit out. So you divide the width by the height. It's also expressed by using a semicolon or a colon. 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 4 to 3, 16 to 9. But essentially it means 4 to 3 means 4 width and 3 height. And 16 to 9 means 16 width to 9 height. Has to be the same unit, but after that it's just a number. Image processing is any kind of image editing performed by mathematically operating on the values of the pixels. Whenever you use any of the programs we've been using, they are mathematically operating on the values of the pixels. They are changing the position, the color, the brightness, the darkness. They're changing those using numbers mathematically, operating on the values of the pixels. So it's called image processing. FPS stands for frames per second. This is the unit of frame rate. It's designated by the number of frames followed by P for progressive. So FPS P, or it's 29.97p. Common frame rates include 29.97p or 29.97 FPS, frames per second. This is the NTSC drop frame. That's what it's called. It was necessary in early video to compensate for the addition of color, and that's why they have a partial pixel. The frame rate we have been using in this class is 29.97. 24p is the standard that was adopted for sound movies and 35mm sound film in the 20s and 30s. 25p is a video format that is used for compatibility with television frame rates. And 30p is a progressive video format. So some additional computer terms you've got to remember. Linked files. When a file is linked, there is code that describes where the image will be located with a pointer to the physical location on the drive of the image file. You need to keep image files in the same folder on the disk or the file cannot be rendered. This is why you sometimes lose a lot of images that were in your After Effects file because they're linked, and if you've moved something, it can't find it. That's why you have to keep them in the same folders. Embedded files, on the other hand, their programs may embed files, including the entire original code in the destination file when you import the file. This means that it becomes larger and larger because you have not only the original file, that is somewhere on your disk, but you also have all the same code duplicated inside of another file. So that is why we have linked files, because it saves space on the disk. After Effects does not embed the files, but will link files that you import. Now we learned about some classic animators: Winsor McCay, Walt Disney, and Max and Dave Fleischer. Winsor McCay was an early groundbreaking animator. He released Gertie the Dinosaur in 1933, and he inspired Disney and Fleischer to become animators. And many other animators also were inspired because Gertie had a character, a personality that was shown so clearly through the images, and this was something that people hadn't really thought could be done before. Walt Disney was an early animator who became the most famous of his generation, and his company still exists. He introduced Mickey Mouse, sound animation, Technicolor cartoons, and the Silly Symphonies. Max and Dave Fleischer were the animators of Betty Boop. In 1917, they invented rotoscoping, which is a method of tracing filmed or videotaped movements to create natural motion in animation. We used rotoscoping to trace Edward Muybridge's image sequence of a greyhound running. And rotoscoping is the method of tracing frames from live footage, film, or video to create motion that appears both realistic and hand-drawn. It was invented and patented by Max Fleischer in 1917. In class, we rotoscoped a greyhound sequence that was created by Edward Muybridge. Some important production terms. A frame is a single image that is part of a scene, like a word in writing. A storyboard is a visual outline of an animation or a movie using keyframes to describe the action. It contains notes about dialogue, camera moves, and editing. We've been using storyboards for everything that we've done in class. A keyframe is a frame showing an important change in position or appearance, used as a guide for subsequent action, used in storyboards to tell the story. Now, the term keyframe is also used in many computer programs to talk about a frame on the timeline that has information about the changes between the keyframes. So it has numbers about the position and the rotation and the opacity and all the other things that we can change. And it holds on to those and then calculates between, making the betweens in between the keyframes. A scene is action unbroken by any change to another visual, like a sentence. A sequence is a series of scenes that express a single theme, like a paragraph. Pose to pose. In pose to pose, the animator draws the first and last frames of the move, then the middle pose, and then draws in-betweens to complete the move. The in-betweens are frames which fill in the gradual changes between the keyframes to create the illusion of a smooth movement. Raster graphics. The image is composed of individual pixels on a two-dimensional grid. The raster map is a grid filled with pixel dots to create the picture. In a raster image, when the object is magnified, the dots become larger and more apparent, so the resolution or number of pixels per inch determines the clarity of detail of the image. In vector graphics, the mathematical formulas are used to describe the shapes in the file. The fonts can be scaled without losing definition, and they will appear the same at any resolution. So you see on the left, that is a vector A, and on the right, that is a raster A. Some design theories. The rule of thirds is a way to organize space. The rule of thirds divides an image plane into 9 equal zones by placing 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. The space is organized to relate objects to the grid structure. Photography, film, painting, and other fields use this theory. Design theory Gestalt principles. All of the Gestalt principles that I have here, all the different explanations, are taken from Greg Berryman's Notes on Graphic Design and Visual Communication. Figure ground. The figure is a positive image, and the ground is negative space or white space. Equilibrium. This is the idea that every psychological field, in other words, anything that makes you think, tends towards order, balance, and maximum efficiency. Isomorphic correspondence. Experiences of people, both physical and psychological, are recalled and triggered by specific visual images. Closure. We have a natural tendency to close gaps and complete an unfinished form. Proximity. Closer parts form groups by visually uniting. Continuation. Organization in perception leads the eye to continue along and beyond a straight line or curve, like arrows. Similarity. Identical visual units will be seen together in groups. Similar objects are defined by shape, size, color, and direction. In a herd of cattle, we perceive Black Angus and Red Herefords as separate groups. Color theory is another way that you can organize space and create effects in your composition. Warm colors, like magenta, red, and yellow, tend to come forward visually and dominate the space. But cooler colors, such as green, blue, or violet, tend to recede in space. Colors can be warmed or cooled by mixing with other hues. Saturated colors will come forward, while desaturated colors will recede. Comparison and contrast determines the effect. Dominant versus subordinate. You can use the placement, size, and relationships between your objects to tell your audience what is important, how it is related to the space and to other objects, and what your animation means. Larger objects will be seen as more important. Objects in the foreground have more importance than objects in the background. Dominance can be determined by size, shape, so you've got a big red triangle and a big round white thing. Those are large. The size is large. The shape is different. The red triangle is different than the round white thing. The color, the red is a very strong, saturated red. It jumps forward. The value, the black is dark and it drops back a little bit. The white is very white and comes forward. The red comes in front of both of them. Depth, texture, density, saturation, once again that red is very saturated. Orientation, the fact that things have been turned on an angle makes them more obvious. This is L. Lissitzky's Beat the Whites with the Red Wedge from 1919. The Russian Revolution, of course. The additive color system is the system that we use in video. It's called RGB color. This is the color that is used in film, video, and on the web. Light is emitted from the source. A wider gamut of color is available because the light is actually coming from the rasters. The primaries are red, green, and blue. The secondaries are cyan, magenta, and yellow. The film and video file presets in Photoshop and Illustrator use RGB color, and this is why I tell you to use the video and film file presets, because you'll have the correct shape and color. Subtractive color system. Now the print color system is a subtractive color system, so CMYK color is subtractive color. This is the color system model used for print. Ink on the surface absorbs the light, and only the light that is not absorbed is reflected back at your eye. The primaries are cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, but black is basically not really a primary, but it's because you cannot mix a true black with mixing ink. The secondaries are red, green, and blue. The file presets for print and illustration in Illustrator and Photoshop use CMYK color. The 12 principles of animation. We used squash and stretch in the first animation project tutorials. Something that is moving will stretch in the direction of the move and squash on impact. Something that is about to move will lean back and then burst forward. Staging is arranging the stage to show the importance, so basically it's composing your space. Straight ahead action and pose to pose. Straight ahead, you just draw each image one at a time straight ahead, or pose to pose, you draw the poses on either side and fill in the in-betweens. Follow through and overlapping action. Motion causes motion of other connected objects. Slow in and slow out. Begin slowly and then speed up. And then when you come to the high speed, then you slow down when you come to a stop. That's the very natural way of moving. You can't start going 50 miles per hour. You have to accelerate. ArtC, motion in curved path, looks more natural. If you watch somebody walking, you'll see their head goes up and down a little bit because that is an arc of motion. Secondary action, objects connected moving independently of each other. Timing, realistic spacing of actions, so things happen at a normal pace. You can tell when something's moving too slow or too fast, or if it's just kind of choppy. You have to look for that realistic spacing of action, look for the timing. Exaggeration, emphasizing and enlarging the details beyond reality for effect. So it's like drawing caricatures of people, trying to get an effect by emphasizing different facial characteristics. Solid drawing, being a good artist, understanding how to draw, understanding what you can do when you're drawing to create different types of effects and situations. And then appeal is when you have genuine emotional contact with the drawn image. So when something looks like it has a personality. So here's stretch and squash, or squash and stretch. This will make a shape change to follow the direction that it is moving and will flatten as it lands. This makes an object appear to be moving naturally. It also gives it more of a sense of energy, kinetic energy. Anticipation, when the character is about to make a move, he pulls back to collect his energy like a cat crouching before leaping. Then as he's about to stop, he slides to a stop. Staging, composing the stage to draw the attention of the viewer to the important details using placement, lighting, color, and Gestalt principles of composition to arrange the space. There's a scale model for the set for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat that was put on at Tolono Unity Junior High School in 1984. And then the completed set for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. This was kind of fun. Wish you could have been there. Then straight ahead, remember the additive, draw, duplicate the frame, add to the image, duplicate the frame over and over. Subtractive, draw, copy the frame, erase some, copy, continue to erase and copy the frame until the image is gone. And then manual transform, you draw, you duplicate, you stretch or skew or rotate, and just keep doing that. So those were the tutorials for the first assignment. Pose to pose. The time of a move is calculated. When does it start? How long does it last? Where does it end? And the number of frames needed is determined. The beginning pose of the move is drawn. The ending pose is drawn. And a position in the middle is drawn. And then you can use onion skinning, which are semi-transparent overlays, to finish the sequence doing in-betweening. Follow through and overlapping action. The motion of the character or object is shown as layers of fluid motion occurring at the same time, but with slightly different timing and placement, like swinging arms while the legs are walking, not the exact motion, but during the same sequence. When the main image stops moving, the parts may continue and then return, like the hair on the head of a character as he stops running. Ease in and ease out, which is slow in and slow out. So our program calls it ease in, or easy ease in and easy ease out. When you ease in, you've got to think of ease into the station. You ease into the station. Your train is going fast. It slows down and comes to a stop at the station. Then when you ease out from the station. Your train is stopped, and then it begins to accelerate, and then it moves faster and faster. Arcs. Animals and people usually move in curved paths. Straight line motion looks mechanical and unrealistic. This is Preston Blair's walk cycle from his book Cartoon Animation, which was published by Walter Foster Publishing in 1994, this one. It was written actually in the mid-50s. We used to require people to buy this book before there was so much available online. But it's a very good book if you get your hands on one and look through it. It's really good for someone who wants to do anything with character animation. Secondary action, eyes blinking, arms swinging, feet tapping. Living creatures move their bodies in different directions all at once, so use simultaneous actions to make it look more realistic. You can see he's kind of blinking while he's walking, his arms are swinging. So, timing. The real world has realistic timing. Things can only happen at certain speed. To make animations more realistic, use your timeline to organize the motions and make it seem believable. Exaggeration. Use skillfully and in careful doses. Exaggeration can add humor, liveliness, and improve the impact of your message, as well as draw the attention of the viewer. So you can see that the old man of the mountain, he's exaggerated all over the place. His head's too big, his ear's too big, whatever. Solid drawing. Good understanding of visual principles like how we understand two-dimensional and three-dimensional space and how to show mass, weight, and materials in a convincing way. In other words, being a good artist. This is Albrecht Dürer's figure of a woman shown in motion. You can see he's done all these measurements. So he's trying to dissect this person and figure out how she's built. Appeal. giving the character a personality and the appearance of emotional depth. Kittens have appeal, but so do alligators, creating an emotional reaction to a perceived personality, positive or negative. Now, some important terms for films and movies. Persistence of vision. The eye sees images in a sequence, changing quickly, and the images persist on the retina until one is replaced by the next image. They are interpreted by the brain as smooth motion. This concept is the basis for movies, video, and animation. So this is a phenakistoscope, and this is one of the earlier types of animations where they would draw images on a disc, and then you would look at it through the little slots by holding it in front of a mirror and spinning it, and it would look like these people were dancing. Scene transitions, a fade, crossfade. Gradual appearance or disappearance of a scene to black. Fades separate major sequences of action and suggest a lapse of time or a change of location. The length of the fade determines the dramatic effect. A crossfade is basically one fade out and a fade in superimposed, so it just changes gradually one picture to the other without going to black. Venetian blinds. Venetian blinds is a type of wipe. In a wipe, the current scene is displaced by a following scene with a distinct edge between. In this case, the shape of the blinds is a set of parallel bars which grow or shrink to reveal the next scene. A wipe. A horizontal, vertical, or diagonal wipe displaces one scene with another with a distinct edge between. In this case, the first scene moves from the right to reveal the next scene, and the edge is feathered to create a smooth transition. An iris wipe or circle wipe. The iris or circle wipe displaces the following scene with a round or oval shape, which grows or shrinks to reveal the next scene. Some file formats and extensions. We've been using the Photoshop files, which are PSD files. This is a proprietary file format for Photoshop. It's raster with vector capabilities. The text layers in Photoshop files can be converted to editable text in After Effects. This is very important. So remember that Photoshop files that have text layers can be converted to editable text in After Effects. The AI is an Illustrator file. It's a proprietary file format for Adobe Illustrator. It's vector-based images and graphics. Vector art can be converted to After Effects shape layers, and Illustrator layers can be continuously rasterized for sharper resolution. An AEP file, that is the file we've been using for our project files. An AEP file is a proprietary file format for Adobe After Effects. It's the project file. After Effects is the visual effects and compositing application used for motion graphics and film production. An MP4, which is the MPEG-4 Part 14. MP4 is the digital media format based on QuickTime for compressed video files. We have been using MP4 for our output files. MP3, MPEG-1 or MPEG-2 audio layer 3. An MP3 is a compressed audio coding format for digital audio. MP3 files are the files that we have been using for our sound effects files, and for most of the files that you're using for sound are probably MP3 files. An AIFF is the audio interchange file format, which is a digital audio file format developed by Apple Incorporated in 1988. That is not compressed. It's an uncompressed file format. And a WAV file, waveform audio file format, is an audio file format standard developed for storing audio on PCs, a Windows and IBM audio file format. This one is also not compressed. Some After Effects import options. When you import as footage, the file is imported without layers, or as a single layer. Audio files are considered footage. Composition. When Photoshop or Illustrator files are imported as composition, all layers are available to be edited separately. Composition retain layer sizes. When PSD or AI files are imported with retained layer sizes, the anchor points are placed relative to the center of the object on each layer instead of the entire file boundaries. Some keyboard shortcuts. Some useful keyboard shortcuts that we have used in class. U will reveal all keyframes that have been created for the current layer, or if no layer is selected, it reveals all the keyframes for the current comp. LL reveals the audio waveform for a sound layer. The V is the selection tool when you have another tool selected, but don't use V when you have the text tool selected, because it will just type a V on the text layer. A P reveals the position transforms for the current layer. A T reveals opacity transforms for the current layer. So think transparency, but it's opacity. An R reveals the rotation transforms for the current layer. The S reveals the scale transforms for the current layer. Pressing the W when you have a different tool selected will select the rotation tool. Pressing the Y will select the anchor point pan behind tool. That's the thing you use to change the location of the rotation point. The open bracket moves the endpoint of the selected layer to the current CTI position. So you can put your CTI somewhere on your ruler and press the open bracket, and whatever layer you have selected will move to start there. If you have several layers that are selected, they'll all move to start there. The closed bracket moves the out point of the selected layer to the current CTI position. So you would move the end of that layer to where your CTI is. Some universal keyboard shortcuts that will work in just about any program. Command Z undoes the previous action. Command A selects all. Command S saves your file.